the one thing, whether or not this is a dream or not, becomes irrelevant. The only thing that matters, if it is a dream, is whether you can realize what the essence of the dream is. Consciousness. And you can only realize that directly, here and now, as this. Oh, Descartes, of course, the French philosopher, said, "I think, therefore I am." If he had waited a little bit longer before saying anything, he could have come to the point of cessation of thinking, and then he could have made the more profound statement, "I am conscious, therefore I am." Thinking is only an expression of consciousness, a surface expression of consciousness. So this realization of, we could call inner stillness, of spaciousness, of presence, of, well, there's a term that's very popular these days, and that's a good thing. It's called mindfulness, which I use almost never, except when I explain why I don't use it. I don't use it because it seems to imply that your mind is full, but it's not what mindfulness is. It really should be called mind emptiness. The entire practice of, for example, people find certain esoteric spiritual practices very strange and hard to understand. Zen is one of those. People say, what does it all mean? What's Zen all about? Cessation of thinking without loss of consciousness. That's what the Zen masters are trying to show you, non-conceptually. As the Zen master became famous because when he was asked, "Please explain the meaning of Zen," all he would do is raise his finger and look at you. Is that it? Yeah. And I've been in the monastery for 15 years for that. Yes. Sometimes it takes a long time before realizing that it doesn't take time to know who you are. That's a paradox. So I'm not saying don't go to a Zen monastery. Perhaps you have to. It may take time to realize that it does not take time, but it doesn't have to take time. It's here and now. I'm saying this to especially the spiritual seekers among you who have made it your life purpose to seek whatever it is, the ultimate spiritual experience or transformation. And the very seeking has become, without you knowing it, the greatest obstacle to spiritual realization.
First of all, one of the things about the global pandemic that I said to my staff and to my family the moment I heard how the circumstances in the world changed, I just said I refuse to be a victim to these circumstances. So a victim consciousness is when we allow something in our outer environment to control the way we feel and think. So if I say to you, "Jay, why are you so upset today?" And you said, "Oh, it's because of this person or circumstance," what you're really saying is something in my outer environment, some person or some condition is controlling the way I think and feel. Now that's not the truth. That's just a response, right? So anything that controls our thoughts and feelings causes us to be victim to those things. And the stronger the emotion we feel to some circumstance in our life, the more we pay attention to it. And where we place our attention is where we place our energy. So we're giving our life force, we're giving our power away to that circumstance. And so I just made up my mind that it was a great opportunity to get into the cocoon. And I don't think I've been healthier in my life. I mean, I'm usually on 6 different time zones in 4 weeks, running a lot of events, as you said, but I saw it as an opportunity to really self-reflect, to really immerse myself into my own personal work, to redo our website, to redo our brand, to connect more with my staff, to cook my own meals again and work out and use my body and do my walking meditations on the beach, and of course I've had a fabulous 9 months or so. But I think, I think one of the challenges I think many people have is really the discernment of information. It's really difficult to know what's the truth anymore, just because information is so accessible. And I used to say that in an age of information, ignorance is a choice. And now we have to confront a whole nother level, and that is the information that we're getting. Is it actually supporting us, or is it something that really is an incentive to cause us to make choices? So for me, I think the biggest challenge has been just really an awakening to what kind of information I want to expose myself to. And I think it's now more than ever a challenge for a lot of people in the world.
So I'm going to talk to you today about a different way of looking at what real is. It's not easy to figure out what real is because we don't really have infinite knowledge, and so we're always making some sets of presuppositions about what's most real. And it really matters what you assume is most real, because you base the decisions that you make that run the entire course of your life on those assumptions, whether you recognize it or not. And if you get the assumptions wrong, or even if you leave them incomplete, you're going to pay a big price for it. And the assumptions that we use in our culture, although they've enabled us to develop a tremendously potent technology, are incomplete in ways that have also cost us and that are extremely dangerous. And since the scientific age began, we've lived in a universe where the bottom strata of reality is considered to be something that's dead, like dirt. It's matter, it's objective, it's external, and there isn't any element of it that lends any reality to phenomena like meaning or purpose. That's all been relegated to the subjective and in some ways to the illusory. But it's by no means self-evident that that set of presuppositions is correct, because we lack infinite knowledge, and there's many things about the structure of being that we don't understand. The main one being consciousness. We can't account for it at all, and we can't account for the role it appears to play in the transformation of potential into actuality, which is a role that's been recognized by physicists for almost 100 years now, and which remains one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in science. There are other ways of looking at what's real, and these other ways have some advantages, and one of the advantages they have is that they protect us. Knowing these other ways of operating within reality, defining reality, protect us from certain kinds of pathologies. And modern people are prone to a fair number of pathologies that stem from assumptions of the systems they use to define reality. And one of those pathologies is kind of a nihilistic hopelessness, which is a consequence of the recognition that in the final analysis nothing really has any meaning. And because life is difficult, and that's a meaning that you can't escape, being forced to abandon your belief in a positive or a transcendent meaning can leave you weak at the times when you really can least afford to be weak.
As you're gearing up to step back into your normal life, if you haven't already done that, I thought I'd just give you 5 quick little triggers, just reminders that are so simple, but these are the 5 things that I personally did when I first got kicked out of my house. Some of you know the story. I remember I was so depressed. I don't know if you've ever been to that place where you're like wondering why you're even around or whether you should be around. It was a pretty brutal time. But what turned me around was feeding my mind. What I mean by that is about a year earlier, I'd gone to this seminar by Jim Rohn. I know many of you have heard of Jim. I went to a seminar, I was 17, and in the seminar, he really talked about the importance of feeding your mind, and you've got to feed it because otherwise things come at you. And so I remember I took the little bit of change I had left in my pocket, and I got on a bus, and I drove, they drove me anyway on the bus for about, I don't know, it's about an hour's away from where I was, because I'd been to this place once before, had this amazing bookstore. And I figured I'll go in there and I'll just read a bunch of books while I'm in there because I can't afford any. And then I picked up a book called The Magic of Believing by Claude M. Bristol. And in this book, it talked about training and conditioning your mind and how what goes in your mind becomes the experience of your life and how to do it. And I was so depressed, I didn't know what to do. And so I went and, I'll never forget, I went back to this little laundry room and there was a mirror there and the book said, put your goals on the mirror so you look through your own eyes into your goals and you see in your own eyes and you read those goals. Do it with soap. And so I did it in the mirror. And then I made these little posters that said things like, only a loser is depressed. Now that's not true. But I felt like I'm not a loser, and that was the leverage I had, right? I can't be depressed if the loser's depressed. And so I just try to work on everything. But gradually I started turning my life around, and I did 5 things, and I did them again. I got to tell you, multiple times in my life when I hit really bad places, when I was told I had a tumor in my brain, and that I might die. When I buried all 4 of my fathers over the course of a year and a half, and my mother. Those are rough times. They start to shift you. When 2008 happened and looked like everything was going under. And I went back and I reapplied them here at the beginning of the pandemic as well. So they're really simple. But first, of the 5 keys to transform your life, I don't care where you are, how great it is, if you can get to the next level, the first step is stand guard at the door of your mind. And I got that from my teacher, Jim Rohn. I remember he came to me one day and I was really frustrated. I was saying, I'm working so hard and nothing's really working and I don't understand it. And I was super frustrated. And remember, he came to me and he said, Tony, he said, listen to me. He said, tell me what are you reading? He said, tell me who you're talking to. He said, tell me who you're surrounding yourself with. And I said, well, I'm mostly isolated by myself. And I said, but I'm so frustrated. He said, listen to me. He said, answer this question for me. He said, what happens in the world if, let's say, your worst enemy comes by and drops sugar in your coffee? And I said, well, you don't have sweet coffee. He said, well, what if your best friend, even by accident, drops 1 drop of strychnine? What if it's your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, somebody you love, accidentally drops 1 drop of strychnine? I said, well, then you'd be dead. He goes, that's right. So remember, life is both sugar and strychnine, so watch your coffee. And what he really meant was stand guard at the door of your mind. Because today, we live in a world where the media, they're not bad people, they're good people, but they're companies. And they got to take care of their shareholders. And the only way they win is by getting your eyeballs. And the only way to get your eyeballs in a world where there's so much information is to startle you. The news is not designed to educate you or inform you. You know that. That's why it says drinking water may kill you. Film at 11. Anything that grabs you. And so we're living in a culture of so much fear. So if you're going to take your life back, you got to take into a limited amount of that media and be able to pursue it, not let it pursue you. Today, most people, in order to get your attention, we all know what they do. It's called clickbait. Let me create a headline that'll grab you. It doesn't matter if the content is even real news or not. A lot of times the headline isn't really what the whole story is, but it pulls you in. There's whole groups of people whose entire life is designing algorithms and language to make you stay online more so they can make more money, but it isn't necessarily to your advantage. So what Jim Rohn used to say to me is, he said, Tony, this is your new daily practice, because this is what I really want to get to you guys here, is if you want to keep momentum, if you join me for those few days there, the 5, 6 days or 7, I guess we did for the challenge, or you went immersion with me as well, the key is to get momentum and keep momentum. If you work your tail off to get momentum going and then you drop it, oh my God, you got to start all over again. And so the way you do that is you have a daily practice.
All of the problems we face today are wicked. None of them submit to singular binary solutions. So rather than these diseases of despair being something over in the kind of humanitarian and social services space, and these wicked problems being over here in kind of the techno-utopian disruptor space, might we consider them flip sides of the same coin? And if we do, how on earth can we begin to solve these wicked problems? And interestingly, the simplest is to think Roger Martin at the Rotman School of Business up in Canada wrote a great book. If anybody hasn't read it, super encouraging. It's called The Opposable Mind. And his premise, after surveying A.G. Lafley at Procter & Gamble, Martha Graham, creatives and leaders and innovators across disciplines, realized that what these folks do that virtually or very few others are consistently able to pull off is that they're able to creatively hold the tension between dynamic and opposing ideas. And that sounds really straightforward. That sounds like the fodder for gajillions of dollars of management consulting workshops and off-site retreats, right? To all get to our innovative place. But reality is that's not a skill set. It's actually a state of mind. And that state of mind is actually tunable today. Now, anthropologists have a very specific term for this. They classify cultures by whether those cultures are monophasic or polyphasic. And that's just a complex way of saying one channel of consciousness or many channels of consciousness, right? And if you think back to most traditional societies, they are polyphasic. They recognize and validate dreams, premonitions, possessions, trances, visions, you name it. Epileptic seizures. They're all like, well, what did you, if you come into the kitchen, in rural Mexico, 50 years ago, you say, Abuela, I just had this dream. They're like, oh, shut up. That's just your unconscious projections of your unresolved issues with your mother. Have your cereal. Right? No, they say, what did grandfather say to you? Oh, let's act on that. Right? So how did we end up in this monophasic culture? Well, you wind back the clock, and blame it on the French. Right? So the Enlightenment, Descartes, right? Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Give me 5 senses. Give me ration, reason, and empiricism. Right? Let's get rid of superstition. Let's get rid of all of those things and let's create, right, this rational, binary, logical world. And it worked beautifully. I mean, let's give full credit. We would not be here in a climate-controlled, high-tech building, community, city. We wouldn't be able to do any of the things that we do without that rational, binary, logical, prefrontal cortical self. So let's, give it up for the PFC, okay? But, right, we never built an off switch. We forgot to build an off switch. And Mark Leary at Duke, who wrote a book called The Curse of Self, literally describes that pernicious problem. We turned on this hyper self-aware, always on hamster wheel mind of ours, and particularly as that has now intersected with this information ridiculous superhighway where we all just get flattened on a daily basis, it's killing us. So the possibility is, what's happened to our dial? And is it completely rusted shut, stuck on this one channel? Or do we have the ability to kind of just rock it loose, lube it up a bit, and regain and reclaim the full spectrum of consciousness and awareness that will allow us to begin taking a crack at the wicked problems that we are all facing and that everyone in this room is committed to solving.
Never let yourself be the victim. If I could go back in time and have a conversation with my 8 to 10-year-old self, that would be the message I would give. Because when you think about it, you're a kid, things don't go your way, what do? You cry, you whine, you throw a fit, you want your parents to feel sorry for you. You feel sorry for yourself.
When you can realize that your worst days were truly your best days. When you can realize that every human being goes through pain and injustice, some more than others, but everyone goes through it. Everyone's had someone be completely unjust to them. Everyone has had someone hurt them who they loved and cared for deeply, or they trusted, or they looked to for support or love. It's part of how we grow spiritually. There's no possibility to build muscle without something you have to lift. And if you don't lift it, it will crush you. And if you lift it, it will be painful. It's not easy to lift those things. But the day in which you finally find inside yourself the story and state that finally makes you no longer be willing to be pressed down by your past, that's the day your life not only changes, but you also now have the ability to give a gift to others. And the most beautiful day, though, is the day when you go, if it wasn't for all that I hated most, I wouldn't have what I love most. Realizing that there was a meaning in all of it and that it served something greater than just little me.
And now they want to throw shade at you, but your shield deflected it. You tell them winning in progress over here, so please eliminate the negative vibe. It's time to remove them from your circle and find yourself a positive tribe. Because misery loves company. But that misery cannot have any of your companionship. Because everybody on your team is working as a unit to come back and win the championship.
Measure your success. Long story short, every day you should wake up with a point to prove. Do you know how many people didn't get the opportunity to wake up this morning, young one? Statistics show 6,316 people die an hour. Again, do you know how many people didn't get the opportunity to wake up this morning, young one? Do you know how many people didn't eat this morning? Humble yourself.
When you face opposition, you got to be able to come out of that box. You got to be able to adjust. You got to be able to be the person that you were meant to be. I'm not talking to the people that's not supporting you. I'm not talking to the people that's not in your corner, that's standing up and clapping, or the people that's telling you and pushing you and telling you that you can do it. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the person that you look at in the mirror, because the only competition is you.
The only person you can truly blame is you, because you are the only person who can get yourself out of it. Live life a victor, not a victim. You say, why me? You should say, try me.
Greatness is your destiny. But at times you must reboot your mental computer, because every step you take today will directly affect your future.
I'd say the number one common thread of anybody that I work with is successful. Financial, athletes, people in politics, it's hunger. You know, you and I both know intelligence is a pretty damn valuable tool, but there are a lot of very smart people who can't fight their way out of a paper bag. And then when you find somebody who has that hunger, the hunger that doesn't go away, that hunger to be more, to do more, to give more, that hunger that never ends, you know, that's how you get these people that are the best in the world at whatever they do. And so if you can, I think everybody has that hunger, but for some people, it's been asleep for a long time because they're afraid. They're afraid that I'm going to get hungry, I'm going to try, I'm going to fail. And so it's human nature to protect yourself from the fear by just lowering your expectations. But one of the things I've learned is you get what you tolerate. You get what you tolerate in yourself, you get what you tolerate in your life, and sooner or later we sometimes hit a point where we say, not another day, not another hour, this is done. I'm not walking this way, I'm not talking this way, I'm not living this way, I'm not gonna be in this relationship anymore, I'm gonna change it. And when people do that, that's the beginning of a breakthrough. Everything in my world is based on coming up with the outcome that will serve and then going at it, but most of the time your approach going at it doesn't work. No one else knows that, but you know, you can see it doesn't work, so it's constantly changing your approach until you can get where you want to go. When I enter an audience and I'm going to give a talk of any sort, I do a huge amount of homework in advance, I prepare, I see who's there, but then when I stand up here, I wouldn't be sitting like this. I'm scanning constantly. Who I'm looking for, the people think it's bullshit. I'm going after the people who got dragged there. I'm not looking for the people clapping for me. You know, those people will always be there, and there's some people who clap even if you're terrible, so you don't want to let other people's view make you feel good. I'm looking for who isn't there so that I can reach them, so I can show them that there's something real here. Because, you know, most people don't know who I am. They'd see, you know, 10,000 people jumping in a stadium and they go, oh, it's just a big motivational pump up. I've never been a motivator. It's never been what I've been about. I think motivation is useful. It's like a warm bath. You should probably take a bath or a shower every day, but you need more than that. You need strategy. But what I really believe is energy. Most of us grew up, and right now, most of you are learning in the traditional style you did even when you were in school. You were trained to go to your seat and be silent and be polite and nice. But the world we live in today isn't like that. The world today, if somebody sits down and waits for someone to tell them what to do, they're in trouble. So my approach is constantly stimulating and seeing what's real, getting people to be raw, and getting to truth. You know, as corny as it is, the truth sets us free, and we all can find our own truth, as long as we put ourselves in an environment where we don't tolerate anything less than that.
Clarity is the DNA of mastery. So if you look at the titans of business, the true leaders in finance. These people literally will say, look at my charts. If you look at a great military leader, you look at a great athlete, they have such granular, in a world of superficiality, they have shifted to massive granularity so they know in intimate detail exactly what their future timeline will look like. Why? Because clarity breeds and builds and is the DNA of mastery. You want to have a very clear vision of what your future is going to look like. And when you know in intimate detail what your future will look like, then you automatically, subconsciously as well as consciously, can say no to the important. So you say a giant yes to the few things that are most important. You've heard me share this before. Confucius said it so well. The person who chases two rabbits catches neither. And so what I'm encouraging you to do is this exercise before you go to sleep tonight. Let's make this very tactical. I call it the 100-year timeline. On a single page from where you now are, 100 years out into your ideal future. I want you every single milestone on a single line to say, here's where I now am. Here's what's going to happen next week, next month, next quarter, next year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, 50 years, 75 years, 1 year, 100 years, until you have a 100-year timeline. On the other side of the piece of paper with crayons, so you tap into your part of the brain responsible for creativity, your right brain, okay? With crayons, draw out your ideal family life, draw 1 year away, draw out your business life 1 year away, draw out your adventure life 1 year out into the future, draw out your financial life, draw out your material life, literally on a page with crayons, so you're not thinking, because here's I think a needle-moving insight. World class comes from instinct versus intelligence. You get your best ideas when you get out of your thinking. And just to give you some neuroscience, the seat of reasoning is the prefrontal cortex, but there's a phenomenon I teach in my live events called transient hypofrontality. This is the secret of genius. Geniuses don't get their ideas for Uber, Amazon, the electric bulb, Tesla, Shakespeare, the polio vaccination, SpaceX. Great ideas don't come from the intellects. They don't come from the neocortex reasoning and thinking. All great heroes and great inventors and great creators dialed into something deeper. When you get out of your neocortex through solitude and my life structure that I teach called the tight bubble of total focus, and when you get away from distraction and you immerse yourself in deep creativity and creation, and you find your laboratory, or what I call your Menlo Park, like Edison had his Menlo Park, which was with the wilderness away from the world, what happens? The prefrontal cortex gets silent. And it's called transient, which means temporary, transient hypo, small, frontality. The neocortex, the seat in your brain of thinking, actually shuts down for a short period of time. This is profound information and will confirm your brain is built for genius. But if you don't do the right things, you're not going to be able to allow the genius to see the light of day.
The hardest part about change is not making the same choice as you did the day before. And the moment you decide to no longer think the same way, make the same choice, act the same way, create the same experience, or live by the same emotion, it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel unfamiliar. There is going to be a certain amount of uncertainty and unpredictability. And the moment you feel uncomfortable, you just stepped into the river of change. Now, most people, the moment they feel uncomfortable, they return back to the familiar state of the mind and body. They start thinking the same way, acting the same way, feeling the same way, and they say, this feels right. No, in fact, that feels familiar. Now, going from the old self to the new self is the neurological, is the chemical, is the biological, is the hormonal, and even genetic death of the old self. That void, that place of uncertainty, that unknown, is the perfect place to create it. And if you and I can become comfortable in that unknown and begin to decide who we do want to be. In other words, many people say when they're in that unknown, I can't predict my future. This doesn't feel right. Well, the best way to predict your future is to create it, not in the known, but in the unknown. So what if you said now, what thoughts do I want to fire and wire in my brain? What behaviors do I want to demonstrate? And if you were to close your eyes and begin to think about how you are going to act, the mere act of mentally rehearsing who you're going to be begins to install the neurological circuits in your brain to look like the experience has already occurred. Now, what that means is that the brain is primed in its circuitry to no longer be living in the past, but now living in the future.
I think that success is a process. And I believe that my first Easter speech in Kosciuszko Baptist Church at the age of 3.5 was the beginning. And that every other speech, every other book I read, every other time I spoke in public was a building block. So that by the time I first sat down to audition in front of a television camera and somebody says, read this, what allowed me to read it so comfortably and be so at ease with myself at that time was the fact that I'd been doing it a while. If I'd never read a book or I'd never spoken in public before, I would have been traumatized by it. So the fact that we went on the air with the Oprah Winfrey Show in 1986 nationally, and people say, oh, but you're so comfortable in front of the camera, you can be yourself. Well, it's because I've been being myself since I was 19. And I would not have been able to be as comfortable with myself had I not made mistakes on the air and been allowed to make mistakes on the air and understand that it doesn't matter. You know, there's no such thing to me as an embarrassing moment. No such thing. If I tripped and fell, if my bra strap showed, if my slip fell off, if I fell flat on my face, there's no such thing as an embarrassing moment because I know that there is not a moment that I could possibly experience on the air that somebody else hasn't already experienced. So when it happens, you say, oh, my slip fell off. And it's no big deal. I mean, like, I was on TV the other day and somebody says, oh, Oprah, you have a run. Have you not seen a run before in your life? Well, I get them too, let me tell you. So, I mean, I can't be embarrassed. I can't be embarrassed. Now, when I first started out, that was not true because I was pretending to be somebody I was not. I was pretending to be Barbara Walters. So I'd go to a news conference and I was more interested in how I phrased the question and how eloquent the question sounded, as opposed to listening to the answer. Which always happens when you're interested in impressing people instead of doing what you're supposed to be doing. And it took me a while. It took me messing up on the air during a live newscast. I was doing a list of foreign countries and there was all these foreign names and then Canada was thrown in and I called Canada, Canada. And I got so tickled that I called Canada. I go, that wasn't Canada, that was Canada. Excuse me, that wasn't Canada, that wasn't Canada, that was Canada. And then I started laughing. Well, it became the first real moment I ever had. And the news director later said to me, well, if you do that, then you should just keep going. You shouldn't correct yourself and let people know. Well, I know, well, who's ever heard of Canada? So that was, for me, the beginning of realizing that, oh, you can laugh at yourself and you can make a mistake and it's not the end of the world. You don't have to be perfect. And biggest lesson for me for television, because then it didn't matter. Didn't matter. Oh, sorry, bra strap showing.
The one way to coach your mind from depression is with gratitude. Every time I feel myself not starting to feel some kind of way, just take a paper and pencil out. Just start writing down everything you have to be grateful for. Whatever it is. Your health, you can walk, you can still see, you have a car, may not be the one you want. I have a place to live. I ate today. I see a way that I can eat tomorrow. I got a friend that I can call and share my troubles with. And just be real detailed with it. You would be stunned how long you'll be writing. Now, let me tell you what happens. Gratitude erases all negativity, because there's no room now for negativity. It's not a magic trick. Joy and depression cannot reside in the same space. Those two things cannot exist at the same time. Also, what it does, it changes your focus from what you don't have to what you do have. Gratitude changes your perception. Your perception changes your existence. That's all you're trying to do. That's all you're trying to do. After you've done that, here's what I want you to do. Write a list after you make this list of everything you're grateful for. I want you to read this list every morning you wake up of everything you're grateful for. After you've thanked him for all this stuff, I want you to take another piece of paper out. I want you to write on this piece of paper everything you want. Everything you want. Now what he gonna do is he gonna tie them two lists together. So now since you showing me all this gratitude for what I've already done for you, remember I said the more grateful you are, the more stuff he'll give you to be grateful for? He gonna take this other list you got and he gonna start putting it on this side. Then he gonna take some more stuff and gonna put on this side. He'll take some more stuff and put on this side. I'm telling you. Let me tell y'all something. If y'all don't think that works, I wish you would try it. Listen to me. I have no other explanation for my life. I do it every single day. And you know what he does? Slowly but surely, he takes this list and he starts taking items and putting it on the grateful list. He has done it for me like that for years and years and years. He did it for me without education. He did it for me when I lost my mom and daddy, my brother, my best friend. He did it for me when they canceled my TV shows. He keeps taking stuff off my want list and putting it on my grateful for list. If you do them things right there, you'll change your whole life.
You concentrate on what you have, you will always end up having more, even if it's just $2. If you focus on what you don't have, you will never, ever, ever have enough. So 16 years ago, I started a gratitude journal, and I will have to say, it was the single most important thing I believe I've ever done. So every day, for years now, I've written down 5 things to be grateful for. And you have to write them down. It's very different than just saying, oh, I'm grateful for today. You have to physically write them down because there's power in the words. Even simple things like fresh flowers or somebody holding the door open for me. So when you wake up in the morning and you consciously look for things to be thankful for, what happens is if you go through the day thinking about the 5 things that you're going to do in the evening, you are more alive and receptive to the goodness that comes in your life. Because sometimes it is as simple as somebody holding the door. So when you allow yourself to feel gratitude in the present moment, in the now, what I promise you is that the spiritual dimension of your life begins to change. It opens up, it expands, and you just grow with it. That is the truth. If I ever spoke the truth in my life, if you want to change your state of being, start to be grateful.
The more you're grateful for, the more God will give you to be grateful for. Instead of complaining about what's going on. Man, I got to go to work today. Man, I got these kids. Remember when you wanted a job? Remember when you wanted a baby? You know what I learned? You can't cry about what's on your plate when your whole goal was to eat. The moment you start showing God more gratitude, he'll give you more stuff. What he do is, he's not gonna keep giving you stuff if what you got you can't handle already. You kill more blessings by not being grateful. That's the #1 blessing blocker, lack of gratitude.
I had a really good friend of mine, I went to lunch and he said, I don't know who this guy is here. And he goes, let me ask you a question. Right now, what are you grateful for? And at the lunch I said, nothing, brother. There's nothing good in my life right now. As I'm mouthing these words, 2 people walked in with an older man. Both of them clearly were fighting cancer somehow. Both walked by our table and gave me the warmest smile as a stranger. And he goes, that's pretty freaking pathetic. You can't find anything in your life to be grateful for right now? Because if you can find things to be grateful for in that space, man, is your life going to be rich when there really are external things to be grateful for. And what happens is there's this reticular activating system in our brains. All of a sudden, all these things start to come into my awareness that I'm grateful for. I started to see things to be grateful for.
Choose to be happy in spite of life's challenges. Life changes every day. Sometimes things will be going your way. Sometimes it won't work so well. Sometimes you'll have your health, you're feeling good, and there's some things that can happen to you in life that can take all of that from you. Life always changes. But you can choose in the midst of all of this that's going on to be happy in spite of it. Viktor Frankl, he said the last of the human freedoms to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Douglas Matlock has a poem I love. He said, sure, this world is full of trouble. Lord, I've had enough and double reason for complaint. Rain and storm have come to fret me. Skies are often gray. But say, ain't it fine today? What's the use of always keeping thinking of the past? Each must have his tribulation, water with his wine. Trouble? I've had mine, but today is fine. It may rain again tomorrow. It may rain, but say, ain't it fine today? Ain't it fine today? Living in the moment, getting everything we can out of where we are in the moment where we are right now. The other thing is willingness to let people and things go, especially if they want to go. When they're no longer good for you, just let them go. Just to hold on tenaciously really doesn't make really good sense, all right? Next thing is face the truth about life and deal with it. In order to have a fulfilling life, knowing that things are going to happen, expect the unexpected. Everything that happens, use it for your upliftment. What can I get from this? How did I end up here? What's the blessing in this for me? And don't let it go until you get your blessing out of it, because there's a blessing there. There's something for you in everything that happens to you for you to learn from that experience. Analyze it, dissect it, take it apart, and then get what you need from that and move on. Here's something I encourage you to do. Whatever you do, do it in a consciousness of love, in spite of the circumstances. Emmett Fox said, love is absolutely invincible. No disease that enough love will not heal. No door that enough love will not open. No wall that enough love will not throw down. It makes no difference how deeply seated may be the trouble, how great the mistake, a sufficient realization of love will dissolve it all. And he ends it in a scripture that says, God is love, and he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in God. Whatever work you have to do it lovingly. Just decide to be more loving, more giving, more caring, more sensitive than you've ever been before. But what if you don't get it back? But don't count on it. Don't let someone else determine who you're going to be. Do it because that's who you are. Do it because it gives your life a sense of fulfillment and self-respect. Anybody can hate. Anybody can do that. Anybody can hold a grudge. But the real challenge about growth and moving into your greatness is about being who you are. I say, as you look at life, as you go toward your goals and your dreams, spring forth with a mighty faith to start the business that ought to be started by you, to make the difference in our society that ought to be made by you. How is it that I can make the contribution that I showed up to give? And one last step, I think, in the area of self-fulfillment, you must live in a spirit of gratitude. There's so many things, ladies and gentlemen, that we take for granted. There are a lot of things that we need to be thankful for. There are big things, there are little things. I'm thankful for my children. I'm thankful for the life that I live and for the people who have enriched my life.
You can't wait till you receive the promise. You have to thank God that the answer is on the way. Don't talk about how you feel. Say, thank you that I'm healthy. Thank you with long life you're satisfying me. In your finances, maybe you're struggling. All through the day, thank you that whatever I touch prospers and succeeds. Thank you that your favor surrounds me like a shield. When you thank God in advance for the answer, that's what keeps you encouraged. You're not going to stay determined if you're talking about how bad it is. God, you said you wanted me to be blessed, but my business is so slow. No, switch over into praise. Business may be slow, but Lord, I want to thank you that you prosper me even in a desert. Praise makes you strong. Praise keeps you moving forward. I'll thank God after business picks up, after I see the solution. So if you don't learn this principle to thank God in advance, you won't have the strength you need to wait for the promise.